Hey, I'm Alex Radical from Board Game Co., and today I'm ranking all 24 Marvel movies so far. And if this isn't your thing, that's totally fair. There are plenty of board game related videos on this channel. This is going to be one of the few that isn't. And speaking of the few that isn't, if this video gets 1,000 likes, 1,000, then we will do another video where Rena is going to rank her 24 Marvel movies in order, and the order is drastically different. Her opinion of Marvel movies, we definitely share some degree of what we like and dislike, but her order is a lot different than mine and a lot more brutal and punishing in her tolerance of various movies. So if you're looking for something a lot more critical and a lot more complaining and possibly more disagreeing with what even you think, well, 1,000 likes will get you that. Although we'll probably do it like 2 weeks from now, so as not to completely overburden the channel with all the non-board game related content. With all that said, timestamps down below to jump to any relevant section. I'm going to be grouping these up into the various sections. I rank board games on a 1 to 5 scale. I'll be ranking these on a 1 to 5 scale as well. The 2s are going to be the videos that aren't for me, I'd rather not watch again. The 3s are going to be good movies. I'm always down for them, but they don't particularly stand out. I think they're just okay. Perhaps elevated a bit by the shared universe we all live in, or they all live in. The 4s are going to be great movies. I really look forward to them. I'm always happy to rewatch them, and if you tell me you're watching one, I am going to try to show up because I enjoy them. And the 5s are the best movies in the Marvel universe. Now, before we begin, I'll tell you that I have 3 movies in my 2s, and 4 movies in my 5s. So of those 24, 3 made it to the very top and bottom of the list. I'll still be ranking them in order, but 3 made it to the top and bottom. 3 made it to the bottom, and 4 made it to the top. If you happen to pause this video and guess correctly which ones they are, honor system and all that, I'll figure out some sort of giveaway for those who actually guessed it. I'm expecting no one will, but statistically speaking, if enough people watch this video and actually take the time to guess, someone's going to be eligible for some sort of a giveaway. So either way, let's go ahead and start it off. The worst movie, in case you want to pause and guess. My least favorite movie in the Marvel Cinematic Universe is going to be Thor: The Dark World. Now, this is a good time to talk about the fact that every single movie on this list I've watched at least 2 times. Some 3, I don't think, oh no, some 4 as well. Some of these movies have been out long enough I've watched them 4 times. But every single movie, with the exception of Black Widow, has been watched 2 times. Black Widow hasn't, not because it's not good, but because it just came out. So I've only had a chance to watch that one once so far. But Thor: The Dark World is a movie that I thought on my second run through, which was like 7 years later, because I was going through the whole MCU one more time with a friend, and we're getting all caught up, and I was reliving every single thing from movies that I hadn't seen in years. And I thought maybe I had convinced myself that Thor: The Dark World was a much worse movie than it was. It is a bad movie. I do not like Thor: The Dark World. I really, really do not like Thor: The Dark World. And by the way, spoilers abound left, right, and center in this entire list. In front of any individual video, expect spoilers, so you can skip to different sections if you want, but just, you know, you've been warned. But yeah, Thor: The Dark World had such a weird plot going on, and none of it really made sense, and it just dragged, and it was slow, the whole thing from start to finish. My only real thing I'm thankful for about it is, despite having just rewatched it like 3 months ago, I already forgot most of why I hated it, except for the fact that I really didn't like it. It had this weird plot, and what's her name? Jane was like in the movie, but not really in the movie. Thor was in the movie. Loki had a few scenes that were actually worth watching and enjoyable. Loki does tend to elevate whatever he's in, but Thor: The Dark World was the least redeemable movie in the entire MCU, a movie that relied on a few moments that were actually impactful, memorable, interesting, or whatnot, but most of it was just a bad plot, slowly dragging on, no real cohesive sense of anything. I really genuinely despise Thor: The Dark World. I didn't want to watch it again the second time. When we were watching the MCU with our friend for the whole revision, I sat there and said, here are the 2 or 3 movies that I'd rather not watch again. I will if you want to have a shared experience, which they did, but I didn't want to. And yeah, that's Thor: The Dark World. Next up is going to be The Incredible Hulk. The Incredible Hulk is a weird one because it's technically part of the MCU, but it feels like it really shouldn't be. This is going to be back when Edward Norton played the Incredible Hulk, before Mark Ruffalo took over. Now, I love Edward Norton. In fact, if I had to choose which actor I prefer, I'd probably say Edward Norton. But as far as the Incredible Hulk, I think, first of all, that Mark Ruffalo captures his spirit, his feeling a lot better. Mark Ruffalo does a great job of portraying the scientist who's got way too much power, who changes, who doesn't really know what's going on. He really captures the feeling of the Incredible Hulk in a way that is, well, really excellent. I think for the most part, the MCU is very well cast, and Mark Ruffalo is not an exception. Edward Norton, on the other hand, while I thought his role in the movie was okay, I don't think he did as good a job at being the Incredible Hulk as Mark Ruffalo did. And more importantly, the whole thing was basically just a tank fest of a bunch of soldiers just shooting Edward Norton the entire time while he goes on his angsty trying to chase his girlfriend situation. I didn't appreciate the Incredible Hulk when I watched it the first time. I didn't appreciate it when I watched it the second time. I like Edward Norton. Again, none of these movies are like the worst. They have moments that are enjoyable. But as a general movie, the Incredible Hulk it's a movie that's in the MCU, that sets the standard for the Incredible Hulk. I don't know why it's in the MCU. It doesn't feel like it's in the MCU. For some reason, it's technically in the MCU, but it feels like a weird one. You don't have to watch it. You don't miss anything if you don't, and you don't get any of the commonality in terms of the actors. I think, was Fury in it? I think Fury shows up at the end, but I think that's really it. But yeah, it's been a while since I watched that one. That one I actually did not rewatch in the entire rewatching the MCU, but I still have watched it twice just because of how old that movie is. I don't want to watch it again. Number 3, and the last one in my 2s, is going to be Iron Man 3. Again, these are ranked from least to most favorite. So Iron Man 3 is, first of all, kudos technically to Marvel for having a movie where they didn't have the villain in the movie basically just be the hero turned into a villain. In Iron Man 3, the villain was totally different. He wasn't like Iron Man, but bad. He was ridiculous. He was a caricature, a comedy character of what a villain is. They take this like super serum that makes them like spew fire. They become fire-breathing humans that occasionally explode. What kind of hot garbage nonsense is that? And then, as well as that, one of the things I don't love is superhero movies in general have this potential problem of power creep. That's something we're going to see in the general MCU now. We just had this world-ending threat of Thanos that the Avengers dealt with, and now we have the next phase is starting, so they have to have some other kind of world-ending threat to deal with, right? They have to have the stakes. You have to be invested in some sort of outcome, which means we need something, and inherently it has to be scarier than Thanos. Because anything less than Thanos wouldn't be scary. We already had Thanos. So you can have small-scale stakes in any individual movie, but for that larger arc, you need something bigger and better and stronger and scarier. Which is fine for now. But then once this next phase, which might be a combined phase, it might be phase 4, 5, and 6, I don't know. But once this next arc of the MCU is over, you're going to have to again escalate it. That's why the comic books constantly reboot the comics, or at least one of the reasons, because you get this consistent power creep. The stakes have to keep being reinvested, and eventually have to start again. And a good example of why it can be a problem is in Iron Man 3, we have this end movie scene where he initiates the something protocol, whatever it is, and a million Iron Man suits fly out and just start tackling all the bad guys. The stakes are so high, he has to have 40 different Iron Man suits there to help him. 40 Iron Man suits that we suspiciously rarely ever really see again. We kind of see a hint of them in the second Avengers movie, in the Age of Ultron, where there's a bunch of these suits around, but they don't seem to have the same gravitas. In one movie, they are glorified security guards hurting population. In the other movie, they are taking out all the bad guys because he needs that additional help from these suits. These tons of little miniature Iron Mans. The stakes constantly get escalated. Oh, and have we talked about the fact that what's her name shows up as Iron Man to a degree? Although, again, to be fair, we do technically see her retake that mantle in Infinity War, so I guess I'll give them points for that over there. But in general, Iron Man 3 had a ridiculous villain, a ridiculous premise, a shunned villain. Now, the shunned villain part I'm fine with. I don't mind the idea that power-hungry people who are really smart in some ways eventually go evil when they're spurned by some imagined slight. I'm okay with that. But the general villain of Iron Man 3, I just thought was ridiculous. I also didn't love the whole Iron Man wandering around in a shell shock for half the movie. The concept is fine. It felt like it lasted too long. Is it realistic to a degree? Absolutely, it's realistic. Is it fun? Not particularly. I mean, the MCU movies to me personify fun. I go to them not because they are dark and gritty and serious and real. If you want that, there's a whole DC universe for that. But I go for the MCU because they are amusing, because these superheroes, realistic or not, are always cracking jokes. World-ending scenario and people dying around you, it's a good time for a joke. Because Well, jokes are funny and they make me laugh, and that's the main reason I'm there. There's a million action movies. Action movies are a dime a dozen. Moving into my threes, starting from the bottom up. And Black Widow is going to be there. Black Widow is, after I finished watching it, I said to the group I was watching it with, I said, this is my favorite Marvel movie from those that I don't want to watch again. I don't want to watch Black Widow again, unfortunately. I thought it was good, but I thought it was too much of a spy movie and too much around family drama that relied on a bunch of silly jokes at the expense of... I should give a pause here because this is the newest movie, so spoilers abound in all these things, but if you haven't watched Black Widow, the potential spoilers here. So the Red Guardian is going to be in the movie, and it's constant jokes at the expense of the family, at the expense of the Red Guardian, and then combine that with some family drama, and then a spy movie that never really takes off. The villain, where is he? Taskmaster, somewhere on this board. Taskmaster shows up and never really has a persona at all. If you ever watch pitch meetings, first of all, watch all the pitch meetings on the whole MCU. They're a blast. But they're like, oh yeah, let's pull the whole Deadpool thing. The Ryan Reynolds from Deadpool thing, where the movie's great. No, the Ryan Reynolds from Deadpool from Wolverine X or whatever it is, and where he has no character whatsoever, and we just take out any degree of personality from him. Taskmaster was a character that I was not invested in as a villain. I could not care less about them. They had no personality, no anything. The stakes around Taskmaster were imagined. The general movie structure of Black Widow had good moments. I enjoyed some of the moments. I enjoyed some of the combat. And I enjoyed some of the characters they introduced. I'm looking forward towards more movies with them in it. But the actual core movie of Black Widow itself felt like a whole lot of weird questions. And again, speaking of things that you'll see in one movie and may never see again, which leads to the question, why not? We had, for the first time, spoilers, one of those, Mission Impossible face masks that, oh my gosh, that person looks exactly like the other person. Are we going to see it in more MCU movies when it's particularly beneficial? Which, ironically, by the way, because in this movie, it wasn't even beneficial. In this movie, it didn't even need to happen. It was just kind of like, let's do it for the sake of doing it, and let's not bother taking the time to do it properly. I had too many small complaints around things in Black Widow that didn't really make sense. I wasn't invested in the family drama situation, and it felt like the jokes were cracked in a way that didn't really line up well. I enjoyed the movie. I had fun with it. I would watch it again. You see, it moved into the 3 category, which means I would watch it again, but I'm certainly not in a rush to do so, and I would do so because, it's better than Iron Man 3, it's better than The Incredible Hulk, it's better than Thor: The Dark World, and I have seen mixed reviews on Black Widow. I know that people felt similar to myself, like, that wasn't impressive, and I know people who are like, yeah, that was great. Whichever camp you fall in, I get it. For myself, I fall into the camp of, I enjoyed Black Widow and I thought it did some things different, but it didn't stand out, innovate, or was interesting or humorous or anything enough. It was good. It wasn't great for me. Next up, we have Ant-Man. Now, Ant-Man, I actually really thought some of the moments in Ant-Man were particularly funny, and this might be the most controversial pick so far, just based on how low it ranks down the list. Although at this point, we start getting into the territory of all the Marvel movies really starting to be pretty decent movies, all things considered. And Ant-Man is a movie that had a lot of funny moments. That Thomas the Tank Engine train hurtling towards Ant-Man, that movement, it was in the trailer for a reason. And I was completely invested in that moment. It was such a great moment to have. And they had a lot of fun, small moments like that. And I love Paul Rudd as an actor in general. My problem with Ant-Man, the reason it's lower down this list is, at the end of the day, while I like Paul Rudd, and while I think the movies are funny, Ant-Man, in terms of the gravitas he brings to the table, somehow doesn't feel like an Avenger quite as much. It feels like he's in the Avengers movies. He has parts to play. He shows up in some fights and combined movies and other things, but he never truly feels like an Avenger the way the other Avengers do. And it's not the cracking jokes thing. All the Avengers crack jokes. We talked about that already. But something about Ant-Man just doesn't feel as much like an MCU movie, so much as like they license the Ant-Man character and they're doing stuff with him. I enjoy the movies. I do. They don't have that same world-ending feel. They don't have those same stakes. Granted, he does seem to play a big part in some of these, like, diving down to the, the quantum realm. The quantum realm, that's what it's called. I enjoy Ant-Man. It's a solid movie. I do recommend it. I would watch it again. I've already watched it twice. 3 times? No, twice. I've already watched it twice. And I'd happily watch it again. It's funny. It just doesn't feel quite as much like an MCU movie. Next up, we have Captain America, the First Avenger. Captain America, the First Avenger was a movie. Here's Captain America over here. And here's Red Skull over here. So Captain America First Avenger, I really like it to a degree. It's just not one that I particularly want to watch. You see, Captain America, when I think about it, is one that I'm like, oh yeah, I like that movie. It had some good moments, getting up and then fighting and Red Skull and things. But when you actually rewatch it and think about it, most of Captain America is about his journey. It's almost like someone took, the origin story of Batman, the origin story of Spider-Man, and made the entire movie into that. There's very little actual endgame stakes going on here, so much as, hey, he becomes a super soldier, he fights a few people, and then he spends half the movie being a symbol for the war, and then he kind of ends up on a mission, and then he fights Red Skull. It doesn't have a lot of real stakes going on. Now, granted, Red Skull does have a big part in it, and when rewatching this recently, I never really realized this, but you know how Red Skull is in Infinity War, or in Endgame, or in both them, and he's playing that part of the Guardian, whatever. I forgot that Red Skull doesn't actually die. He kind of gets just sucked up into space in the end of Captain America, the First Avenger. I thought it was a good setting stone for future movies. But as a movie itself, I watched it twice. I'd watch it again. I don't think Captain America was particularly amazing. It was a good development for Steve Rogers. It was a good development of the character. But it's still, to this day, when I rewatch it, it feels like a setting up movie, not so much like the actual movie I came to see. Next up from there, we have, somewhere over here, another Captain. We have Captain Marvel. Captain Marvel is a movie that, again, has some really good moments in it. I like the throwback scenes. I like the thing crashing into Blockbuster. I like seeing Nick Fury and Coulson all younger and doing the whole Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. thing before it was cool. I like some aspects, I like the cat. Captain Marvel, Carol Danvers has some good moments in it. But the overall sequencing of the movie, it felt, again, a bit out of place to begin with. I'm curious to see where Carol Danvers goes next. Now, she does have that Superman problem. She has that problem that she's so powerful, they literally have to invent reasons why she's not around so that she could actually have an impact. You see, she's sitting there doing her whole superhero girl thing and being incredibly ridiculously powerful, but she has that Superman problem of, you can't kill her, you can't hurt her, she can do whatever she wants, she can tank entire spaceships that all these other superheroes are trying to combine to do something about, and so she has to be off saving other galaxies, which as a whole just feels like such a weird way to make me feel invested in the character. You see, I don't mind the action in these movies, but I don't feel invested in Captain Danvers at all. I don't feel Captain Marvel, Carol Danvers, I don't feel invested in her at all. I don't care what she does, I don't care what happens to her, because she has this aspect of seemingly being immune. Her stakes in the MCU so far are either I'm on screen helping all the good things happen, or I'm off screen helping other planets. I'm never in trouble. I'm never really vulnerable. Worst case scenario, I am just in middle of helping the big bads be destroyed. I don't mind. I'm curious. I'm curious to see how they develop it. You see, Superman as a concept, slight tangent to DC, I've never loved most of the Superman movies for this reason. I have really enjoyed Henry Cavill as Superman, but even then he has that same problem to a degree. When you create someone who is indestructible and who can do whatever they want, it removes some of the stakes of feeling invested, attached to either the character or to what happens to that character. Next up, we have Iron Man 2. Where's Sam and our little team of people? Iron Man 2, which I'll try to find. This is not Iron Man 2. Here's Iron Man 2. I really enjoyed Iron Man 2 because, where's Iron Man? I gotta stop trying to find all these characters because it's just, here we go. Iron Man, and there we go, War Machine. Iron Man 2, I really enjoyed with caveats. Now, to begin with, I love Sam Rockwell. Sam Rockwell is one of my favorite actors out there, along with Ed Norton for that matter. Just, I love Sam Rockwell in the MCU, and I love Ed Norton out of the MCU. But Sam Rockwell is such a delightful character, and I really appreciate everything he brings to the table. Along with that, the villain who played Whiplash, I can't remember his name, but I really appreciated his presence as well to the Iron Man 2 film. And I appreciate the escalation of the character, the villain. I like the villains in Iron Man 2 far more than I like the villains in Iron Man 1. The overall movie, the pacing felt a little weird. There's a lot of interesting, bizarre questions as to what's going on. A lot of times where you feel like Whiplash could have or should have been killed, but somehow wasn't. I mean, the whole scene on the racetrack is like, what's going on here, and why is no one stopping him, and why is he just able to do whatever in the world he wants? He's not like super powered and vulnerable. He's just a guy with giant metal whips. This should be an easy target, right? So there are questions on the film. But past that, I really appreciated most aspects of Iron Man 2. I appreciate the development of War Machine. I appreciated the villains, Sam Rockwell and Whiplash. I appreciated the end scene, the end combat of having all these robots basically start turning around and attacking everyone else, and people having to come in and save the day from what was supposed to be the US Army, whatever. I appreciate the start of the movie where Iron Man starts off, he's just been discovered, people are starting to realize who he is, and now so he's doing that whole thing where he just makes fun of the US government because he's just super cool, and he's Tony Stark, and he's got those little things and devices and cameras, and look, Sam Rockwell's things is blowing up and just causing mayhem and ruckus and all that. I like Iron Man 2. It was solid, it was enjoyable. I'd still watch it again. I think it, again, has some elements that don't make sense to me and are a little ridiculous, but overall I enjoy it. Then we have Ant-Man and the Wasp. Now, Ant-Man and the Wasp, if we could find the Wasp over here, is one that I definitely enjoyed more than Ant-Man. Now, I enjoyed it primarily because of the interactions between Ant-Man and the Wasp. See, the Wasp, more than Ant-Man, feels like a character in the MCU, and the combination of them potentially can lend itself to feeling like they work together in ways that, and by the way, I love these miniatures with the dice and the coin, those are excellent. But overall, Ant-Man and the Wasp, and some of those moments, they have the salt shaker throwing. Now, I didn't love the villain situation in Ant-Man and the Wasp. The villains, first of all, you feel bad for the villain, which is nice, I like that, but it felt a little off, the entire villain situation of what was going on there, being trapped in the quantum realm, all of that. I like the addition of someone to counter out Paul Rudd. I think they do it better. I think it does a better job of making Paul Rudd feel more like a character and less like a constant joke. And again, I like constant jokes. I'm not against constant jokes. It's the way that they're presented. Paul Rudd always feels like a little bit like he's being made fun of the whole movie as opposed to he's cracking jokes the entire movie. But overall, I like Ant-Man and the Wasp slightly more than Ant-Man on its own. I am curious to what the Wasp will continue to bring to the MCU. And then we have Thor. Base Thor. Base Thor, which I already had over here somewhere. But Base Thor is going to be, I think this is Thor. Base Thor had one of the worst endings of a movie. I did not care for that villain at all. But I really liked the rest of it. Similar to Captain America, it has a bit of a problem where it feels like the movie is mostly a build-up towards the development of Thor, which I liked, but then it never really executed on that. It's all about Thor finding himself. You know, Thor is in Asgard, he's a bit of a jerk. I mean, honestly, he probably is a bit of a jerk, and it's not the first jerk we see in the MCU. Doctor Strange comes along and does the same thing. But he has to develop and grow because bad things happen, and he gets cast down to Earth, and he has to be worthy of getting the hammer, and all those things are cool and fun. And the character develops. I like all the side characters. I like Nick Fury, I like Coulson, I like Hawkeye. The development of various characters in the MCU are starting to all come together, and you're starting to see this world build up. And then, of course, there's Loki. Loki, who carries everything he's in to a degree because Loki is just delightful. But yeah, the movie overall is very solid. Where it falls apart for me is the Endgame. Not Endgame, but the Endgame of Thor. In Thor, you have that robot stake thingy, the robot coming down from Asgard to kind of punish everyone because Loki's currently in control, and he's just shooting everything with these giant laser beams, and it just comes down to Thor eventually getting his hammer and smashing him. It felt like a weird ending. It didn't really feel in line with the rest of the movie, not quite as enjoyable. Overall, the movie I liked a lot, and I'd rewatch it easily, but again, similar to Captain America, I think it has that same problem of feeling like a build-up movie rather than execution on it. But unlike Captain America, it has Loki, which is a weak spot of mine. Then, lastly, in the threes, we have Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2. Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2, I enjoyed Guardians of the Galaxy quite a bit. But the Volume 2 is one where I felt, find Groot and the stuff, I don't know who the villains are, here we go. These are all Guardians of the Galaxy, but whatever it is. Anyways, Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2, the villain, again, was a little weird. This whole situation of his abandoned father, this god, half-god situation, that whole thing was weird. I liked having Nebula in it. Nebula's somewhere here too. I don't know where all the people are. We'll call it a day. Nebula. Where's Nebula? Whatever it is. Anyways, overall, I'm just kind of bugged by this because I want to find Nebula now, but I don't know where Nebula is. Here we go. Here's Nebula. Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2 felt very strange, especially in the way it ended. The whole thing and the combination of the god powers of his father and the fighting that happens therein. I mean, they has that excellent moment with Rocket Raccoon, or Baby Groot and Rocket Raccoon, trying to figure out the bomb situation. No, that button, no, don't hit that. It has some hilarious moments because they are the Guardians of the Galaxy. And the overall build-up, I really appreciate it, but it has this really slow mid-game to the movie where, you know, he's just getting to know his dad. Starkiller's getting to know his dad. It's all sweet. It's all heartfelt. It's also fairly boring and doesn't really invest you in the characters, the growth, the development, and just feels a little off and weird. has a lot of, the starting thing was incredible. When you have Baby Groot and the dancing, the music, it has a lot of good moments because the characters in that movie are excellent. But the actual movie itself was a step down, I thought. A big step down from the original Guardians of the Galaxy. One that I'm still completely fine rewatching because it has enough funny moments, enough humor to keep me going back. But I go back to it expecting a lot of humor, and then a story that feels very weird at times, but has some good moments. Drax in general is always hilarious. Drax is always funny, and the whole thing of the jokes, everything goes over his head and serious, and making fun of Gamora and Star-Lord's romance. Everything in the movie is funny and enjoyable to watch. It's just the actual villain and story. It's a good enjoyable movie to watch. Yet the actual story is just bizarre and a little all over the place. Then we start with the fours. The fours are going to be the movies that I really enjoy, have far less to complain about, and overall are just really solid movies. Starting off, if I can find them, with Black Panther. Black Panther, we have a villain somewhere here. Here we go. Black Panther, I really enjoyed. Now, it is my lowest of the fours. I like Black Panther a lot. I don't like Black Panther as much as most people seem to. I love the joke. It has the joke of the two token white guys. If you haven't heard that joke before, it's hilarious. You see, Black Panther is a movie primarily about, the Wakanda and all the people in there. And we have like two white people in the movie, two white characters that are actually the focus. And those two characters are, Bilbo Baggins from the Hobbit trilogy, and then Gollum, the actor who played Gollum. So it has the two Tolkien white guys. You get it? The two token white guys, the two Tolkien white guys. It's a cute joke if you haven't heard it. If you have heard it, then you just heard me explain that joke to you. But either way, I really like Black Panther. I like him a lot, and I'm really sad for Chadwick Boseman in general. Like when I heard that he passed away, it was sad. Not because not because of future movies, but because he's a young guy, and it's sad when anyone passes away. Don't get me wrong, but it's sadder to a degree when someone young, someone unexpected passes away, especially if you didn't know. It's like really like it feels like a life taken as opposed to a life lived. And the movie itself, though, he was such an incredible Black Panther. He was perfectly cast. Did an amazing job of conveying both royalty as well as superhero all in one. Did a great job. Along with the various crew, do we have any other characters? Here we go. We got her over there. A ton of fun characters. His sister is a ton of fun. The something name, I can't remember the name for the trio or whatever it is, but they're so well done. The whole movie was incredibly well done, and they have these scenes of like just the car chase. It's a lot of fun. The villains in it I didn't love. And the whole, like, fight to the death combat thing of, oh, look, oh no, we have to respect and honor this new Black Panther because he has won a fight to the death. Like, the movie basically has this thing where the character, the evil villain, his half-brother or step-brother or brother, or cousin, I can't remember whose exact family ties, but he has this challenge. He wins the challenge, and everyone's like, oh, let's respect this madman who's going to just completely take over. Now, eventually, they all say, well, no, we won't respect this madman. He's literally trying to kill people, and we're going to turn on him. But they kind of have this eventual moment that the audience is there all along for that moment. So I really liked it. I liked it a lot. I liked, what's his name? The guy with the laser, Claw. Claw is a lot of fun. I like his presence. He's one of the token white guys. But yeah, I really liked the characters in the movie. But the actual process of defeating the villain felt a little out of place. And of course, it had that thing that I always complain about, where Marvel movies tend to very heavily rely on, we have the good guy, and then we're going to make him fight the equivalent version of himself who happens to be bad. That's the way these go. And that's very much what we had. We had Black Panther versus evil Black Panther. That was the movie. That was the final fight. The rest of the movie was amazing around that. And even the final fight, when you have the various teams of Wakandans crashing, I don't know if you call them Wakandans, the people in the movie, all fighting against one another in those final scenes. I really enjoyed that whole clash of battle, of just charging each other, the various troops, the cloaks, the units, the weird creatures they're riding. All of that was very solid. But again, the actual Black Panther versus evil Black Panther, that one I wasn't so invested in. Then we have Spider-Man Homecoming. Spider-Man Homecoming is delightful. Now, I never liked Tobey Maguire, to be very clear. Not him personally. I don't care about him personally. I never liked Tobey Maguire as Spider-Man. Never thought that really took off. I did like Andrew Garfield as Spider-Man, but he felt very much like Ultimate Spider-Man. He's the cool kid Spider-Man. He's not really the personification of what you think of as Peter Parker. But I love Tom Holland. when they announced that they were getting rid of Andrew Garfield and they're recasting someone else, I was disappointed because I really enjoyed Andrew Garfield. I really enjoyed that universe. But when they actually cast Tom Holland, and when we saw him as the role, I really, really liked that Spider-Man movie. I really liked Tom Holland. And when they had Spider-Man Homecoming, they had the perfect mix of Marvel-style humor, the type of humor you're expecting, looking forward to, all of that. Did a really, really solid job of just... I really enjoyed Spider-Man Homecoming. It was so well done in terms of its general... the just humor it brought to the table. We have Zendaya as, MJ and all that. We have the Vulture character. Here we go. Here's Vulture facing off against Spider-Man. Overall, I really enjoyed the humor, the presentation. I love the fact that they skipped the origin story because we've seen it like a million times and we're kind of done with it. But they skipped that. They went directly past that into Tom Holland as a likable character that we all could enjoy and get behind. And really, really enjoyed Spider-Man Homecoming. I thought it was a solid addition to the MCU. Brought in just enough Iron Man Tony Stark to make it feel like he's in the MCU, but it brought in with the humor and gravitas. Now, technically, we saw Spider-Man first in Civil War, but we haven't gotten to Civil War in this list just yet. Which brings us to Iron Man. Where's Iron Man? Iron Man, I had already. He's over here. Here we go. Iron Man was a lot of fun. Now, Iron Man is a movie that would theoretically rank higher on this list, and back when I first watched it, it probably would have been a 5, but over the years it has crept down. Partially because I think I've watched Iron Man like 6 times, which doesn't help, but also because I think Iron Man was incredibly amazing for its time. When I'm weighing it up against other movies in the MCU now, I think it's good, but again, it has that same arc that many of the first movies do. It has the same arc that Thor does, that Captain America does, where the whole movie is a build-up. The whole movie is a build-up, and then the actual final fight scene is kind of weak. Like, not interesting. Meaning, it has this amazing arc, and then just an ending that doesn't really do it for me. Having Iron Man face off against whatever his, co-business person is, felt bizarrely weird. Because here's what we have. We have this entire movie, we have this brilliant inventor living in a cave, basically figures out the way to get out, to escape, and then we have the whole movie spends developing his skill set, getting better and better, flying around as Iron Man, doing all the things you'd expect to be able to be a better version of himself, to be the superhero that everyone wants to see. But then he faces off against somebody who's like, build me a bigger suit, and doesn't spend any time training in it. And just amazingly, right away off the bat, is like super duper powerful. It just feels weak. It feels like an incredible movie with an ending that doesn't make sense at all, that doesn't line up, that the whole payoff at the end of the movie is a waste. The movie's great. Iron Man's great. The presentation of Tony Stark, amazing. Being the first movie in the MCU, if you pretend Incredible Hulk doesn't exist, absolutely the best first movie in the MCU I've ever seen. But as far as that final fight, felt like a complete waste. When I rewatch Iron Man, I'm fine rewatching it, but I like to pretend that the movie ends 3/4 of the way in. Iron Man developed. Ta-da! The final fight just feels completely out of place. And then we have Spider-Man Far From Home, which is rapidly after Spider-Man. Now, I debated which one I preferred more, Spider-Man Homecoming or Far From Home. I think I do prefer Far From Home. Now, granted, I'm saying that as somebody who recognizes that the entire scene of Mysterio basically delivering, here's how we did this stuff. What's it called? There's a term for that when people just narrate what they've done unnecessarily. But yeah, they spend some time unnecessarily narrating all the things they've done in the movie, telling you, oh yes, we did this, and you're that villain, and I'm that villain, this is how we figured it all out. But I passed that scene, which was a little bit ridiculous. I really enjoyed Mysterio. I like the actor in general. I like, what's his name? I can't remember the name of the actor. But I like him as an actor in general. I liked his addition to the movie. I liked the general back and forth of the tone, the pacing of the movie. Spider-Man's on a field trip. Spider-Man is trying to help figure out these world-saving events. We have Mysterio trying to take the glasses from Spider-Man. Now again, it does have that fatal flaw of the way Tony Stark passes on his glasses to Spider-Man feels a little off, feels a little weird. It feels like it could have been done far, far better than the way they actually handled it, in such a way that Mysterio can basically just take control of them. But past that, I really liked it. I really like the scenes of Spider-Man unable to do anything because Mysterio's painting him into these realms of illusion were incredibly well done, I thought. There's the general idea of not knowing at all what's true, what's not true. The general end fight of having this giant beast and all these cameras. Now again, it does fall apart in some ways. The general presentation of having all these robots doing their thing and just perfectly working in cohesion. There's a lot of questions I have, a lot of weird things of oh, look at this robot illusion thing that managed to make buildings blow up. But yes, it was done with perfectly timed rockets that no one noticed. The whole thing The movie doesn't make sense. But if you ignore the parts where it doesn't make sense, then I really liked it. I liked Spider-Man. Now, I'm not ignoring, again, different movies here. I'm talking about different parts that don't make sense. Some bother me more than others. That's just the way it is in terms of my own personal ranking. But overall, I really like Spider-Man Far From Home. I'm looking forward to the next one. And also, can we just talk about having J. Jonah Jameson in the end? Having the actor from the original movies, whose name I'm blanking on right now, but show up again as J. Jonah Jameson. Oh my gosh. I mean, that is worth the price of admission alone. And then we have Avengers Endgame. Avengers Endgame is going to be my next one. And that is my least favorite from, I think, all of the Avengers movies. We have Avengers Infinity War, we have Avengers Age of Ultron, and Avengers Endgame. And Avengers Endgame, I really liked. Keep in mind, it's fairly high. It's in the top 10 Marvel movies for me. But at the end of the day, Avengers Endgame had time travel. I don't love time travel. And it had these whole suits. It felt like Avengers Endgame was a two-part movie. The first part is basically repeating all the stuff they tried doing in the first movie, just in a different timeline, a different multiverse. You have this kind of chasing down of trying to find a different Thanos, because Thanos is dead, Thanos is gone, so how else are we going to do anything? Well, we need to get the Infinity Stones from different timelines, bring them in here. The whole thing feels like a very convoluted movie. It feels, and I don't know what actually happened here, I'm assuming it didn't happen this way, but it feels like someone wrote Infinity War. Someone came up with an ending that was brilliant and amazing and didn't in any way think to tie those universes together or how it's going to follow up and finish and develop. And then someone else came along and said, well, we have a bit of a problem on our hands now, so let's see, we can do this. What's this? We can just do this. We can just, find Infinity Stones in other timelines, tie them together, bring them back, and just make it work. It doesn't feel cohesive. It feels like two different movies, one on top of the other, one following the other. It didn't work well together for me. Now, I like Endgame. Don't get me wrong. I think Endgame is a solid movie, and I really did enjoy it. It just didn't feel like a true follow-up to Infinity Wars. Now, where I do love Endgame, where Endgame is ranked so highly, is once you do have Thanos in the picture. Once he does enter the mix, and once you stop this timeline hunting version of multiple different story paths that don't really tie together with the same world-ending gravitas that the first movie did, then you do get into the second half. And that one does have the same world-ending gravitas. That one does have the feel of, okay, it's take two now. We lost the first time against Thanos. Let's see if we can make it work this time. Let's bring in everyone. All the Wakandians. All the everyone's. Captain Marvel will show up. Carol Danvers with her ultimate world-destructing abilities of whatever. They're all going to tee up against Thanos. And I love that whole all-woman team up at the end. I know people have a problem with it to a degree. Like, some people have a problem with it. Some people love it. Some people have a problem with it. I'm in the camp of I love it. It's cute. It's whimsical. Is it realistic? No, but cracking jokes while the world's dying is generally not realistic either. I just thought it was a good moment. The Avengers movies in general are full of these moments where just people team up together. They show themselves as being a team, and then everyone's like, yeah, that was fun. That was a blast. And that woman team up of attacking Thanos and all that was a lot of fun. In general, Avengers Endgame ended on a beautiful high, and then of course it also ended on the beautiful lows of who's gone, of who's not returning, of who's not coming back for take two. But it didn't have a good first half, which is why it's lower on my list. Next up, we have Avengers Age of Ultron. Now, Avengers Age of Ultron, I debated which one I preferred, Endgame or Age of Ultron. You see, Endgame, I think, had a much better stakes at the end of it. But I love the character, the villain of Age of Ultron. I can't remember his name. He's from the Blacklist. But that guy's, the voice of Ultron was so ridiculously well done. The character of Ultron, of having them all team up, having that stakes of, they're trying to create an AI, and that AI turns into Ultron. That AI needs to be taken out. And that's where we have Vision enter the picture as well, if I can find him somewhere here. We have Vision entering the picture because of that, and Wanda enters the picture, and for a very short time, her brother enters the picture as well. We have Wanda somewhere over here. Here we go. All these characters entering into the MCU. Some of them never to be seen again, but others showing up in, TV shows. But anyways, yeah, we have Ultron who has to be taken out, and I really, really liked Ultron. I like the way he infiltrated all these systems because he's, AI and can do all that. I like his manipulation of the twins. I like his general stakes. I like the introduction of Claw. Like, Claw shows up in Age of Ultron, which some people forget about that, but he didn't first show up in Black Panther. He showed up in Age of Ultron as a weapons trader and all that, and that's how he lost his arm, because Ultron had a little temper tantrum, which is an interesting conversation of robots having temper tantrums and emotions and all that. Whatever it is, it works. I thought Ultron brought a degree of threat, of gravitas, his voice, his tone, his degree of menace, as he's trying to rescue humanity from themselves, which is a classic AI taking over the world kind of storyline. But I thought it did so incredibly well. I thought it did so in a way that I was very invested in the world going on. I was invested in what happened in Sokovia and how everything was just wrapping up there and how he's going to crash us down into the planet and just destroy everyone. I really liked the overall movie of Age of Ultron. I liked the team-ups at the end of them all attacking him. I like all the Avengers working together to simultaneously attack his robots and save the people. I shared people's disappointment of Age of Ultron being a step down from the original Avengers movie. But past being a step down, I really liked what it was doing. I really liked the movie past that minor step down aspect. And that's going to be Age of Ultron. And then Doctor Strange. Doctor Strange, if I can find him here, Doctor Strange is one of my favorite characters. Now, like Loki before him, elevated by Tom Hiddleston, Doctor Strange, somewhere, is going to be elevated by Benedict Cumberbatch, who I really love as an actor. Almost everything he's been in, I have enjoyed immensely. Now, he brought a lot of things to Doctor Strange. Now, sadly, he did bring the arrogance, the degree of he's a jerk of a person, of a human being, of a personality, of this doctor that thinks he knows better than everyone else and ultimately gets himself into trouble because of it. But I really liked Benedict Cumberbatch as a character. I really liked his evolution of Doctor Strange. I really liked the mind-bending madness that was the movie that he's in, that degree of rural twisting things. They took a character, and this is true of most of the MCU, by the way. They took a character that I didn't necessarily care about that much. These aren't the classic Batmans, Wolverines, but Supermans that I grew up with and knew and loved. They are these characters, these side characters that, as someone who didn't heavily read the comics, I knew Doctor Strange existed. He showed up in things. And then they just brought character to him, and to his cape for that matter. They just brought a degree of character and investment in that character and the way they develop. Now, the ending of the movie also falls a little bit short for me. Better, much better to me than some of these other movies that had these, like the Iron Man or Black Panther. The Endgame fight, at least Dormammu had a degree of not being Doctor Strange, which is always nice when you don't have the villain being the villain. And I liked Dormammu, and I liked the little degree of, Dormammu, I've come to bargain. Dormammu, I've come to bargain. Again and again, wrapped in an infinite loop. It is a clever twist, but still felt a bit anticlimactic, given the power of Doctor Strange and the end game of that movie resorting to just kind of a trapped time loop. Not winning so much as forcing someone away. Again, clever. I enjoyed it. Past that, though, the general humor, the general development. Now, you have to get also Rachel McAdams, who I love as an actress as well as in that movie, so solid job all around in those things. But I like Doctor Strange, but you do have to get past the fact that he's an arrogant jerk who becomes not an arrogant jerk only because he's kind of forced into not being an arrogant jerk. So that part, I kind of am sympathetic to anyone who doesn't like the character. But his cape, his presence, his gravitas, his humor, his general disdain that shows up for other people, disdain that is a little bit of arrogance, a little bit Tony Starkish. Like Tony Stark and Doctor Strange together in a room are always fun to watch them face off. Both of them having a degree of disdain for the people that they consider weaker and less powerful than themselves, just in very different ways. Tony Stark is a bit arrogant, and Doctor Strange, once he gets into his whole role as Doctor Strange, just thinks other things are beneath him. But the way he does so, the way he loops characters, the way he controls Loki, the way he just shoves Thor down into a chair, handing him a glass full of beer, but not handing him so much as making it appear. I really like the character. I really like the addition to the universe. I felt the first movie was good, could be great, and I'm excited and eager to see how the next movie develops. Doctor Strange, the Multiverse of Madness. I'm very excited to see what they do with the character now that we already know who he is and have been introduced to him. And then lastly, in my fours, we have Captain America Civil War. I really liked Civil War. A lot. despite the villain being just manipulation. The villain at the core of Civil War is the idea of manipulation, of manipulating your enemies to get what you want out of a situation. But I really liked the stakes of Civil War. Having the characters face off against themselves, having the characters branch off into teams that almost weirdly make sense sometimes, also don't make sense other times. Like you have Tony Stark, who's always against authority, caving to authority. And you have Captain America, who you'd think would be aligned with authority, being against it. So they have these interesting aspects of where the characters side up, or where they line up. But the real stakes of being in each other's faces, of having these fights, of having people almost potentially get hurt or whatever. I really liked the way Civil War lined up characters against one another in a way that you felt that they clearly cared for each other, but they believed in something that was right. Now, which side was right? They each believed their own side was right. But they were fighting for a belief system. It wasn't that we fight that person because they're bad, we fight this person because they're bad. It's we fight for the things we believe in, even if that means we are sadly and unfortunately facing off against each other. I also love the addition of Spider-Man to that movie. This was the first time we saw Spider-Man in the MCU, and it was great. Underoos! It was a great addition, and it was great. It's the first time you see Tom Holland in an MCU movie wisecracking away as he's fighting for his life. It felt like Spider-Man. And then you see Ant-Man showing up too in a way that felt more MCU-ish. Paul Rudd, less of the focus on Paul Rudd, far more of the focus on Ant-Man as the superhero. And the way he just goes from small to big. Seeing Hawkeye just shooting things at people in ways that work. In general, I really like the Civil War. That airport battle scene is going to be the highlight of the movie, but the rest of the movie is very, very solid along the way. And that end fight where you have Iron Man facing off against Bucky, who's somewhere here, facing off against Bucky and Captain America. That little scene at the end was also incredibly impactful. That tenseness of just tossing the shield back and forth, taking down Iron Man together, is heartbreaking, but it works. It invests you in the movie. And then we have the fives. The fives, again, in order from least to most, are going to be Marvel's The Avengers. The Avengers was an incredible movie when it came out, and it's a movie that I think genuinely holds up today. The Avengers as a movie involves all the characters finally teaming up, the culmination of not that many movies. It seemed like a lot at the time, but what was it, 7, 8 movies, something? They team up together to be the Avengers, to take down this world-ending threat. The movie starts on a high and it never really falters. It's a movie that still holds up when I watch it now. It's a movie that I think of it as being... See, Iron Man and the Avengers are both movies to me that I think of as being great. But when I rewatch Iron Man, I'm like, oh, it was great for its time. And when I rewatch the Avengers, I'm like, no, it's still great. It still holds up. That circling camera as they all team up together. The fighting with Coulson. The only part that feels out of place is Loki as such a horrific villain, and Loki kind of morphing throughout the MCU from this horrible villain character to the character who's always torn, trying to get power, but also misunderstood. It's weird seeing him in straight up world-ending destruction mode, because I no longer think of him as that. But the rest of the movie, it's such a good movie in the MCU. It does such a good job of combining the characters, combining the strengths, making you feel invested, having those aliens pour out through the skies of New York as the Avengers do what they can to stem the flow, to try to, in some way, ensure that they actually aren't going to, well, ultimately lose that battle. Next up, we have Guardians of the Galaxy. See, Guardians of the Galaxy was a movie that came out of nowhere. Genuinely, out of nowhere for everyone. Guardians of the Galaxy was a movie that had a bunch of side characters from the side comic, and it was like, Marvel's doing this, and people are torn between, well, that's stupid, to, hey, Marvel's done a lot, let's see how it plays out. And the Guardians of the Galaxy is such a good movie. The degree of humor it brings to the table, the new characters, Groot, Rocket Raccoon, the way it did them, Star-Lord, it did such a good job of introducing these characters in a way that really invested you in this team, despite their complete lack of connection to the MCU, at least so far. We'll see that connection show up later, but for right now, they're completely divested. Their own separate story with no tie-in other than, like, Earth and the universes being involved. But they did such a good job. The humor left, right, and center is top-notch. It really, like others before here, the movie just holds up. And the music, the soundtrack of Guardians of the Galaxy, it pulls you back. You're enjoying the movie while being pulled back to younger years of those songs. Of just does such a great job in the soundtrack, in the casting, in the humor, in the takedowns. Gamora, Nebula, Star-Lord, Groot, Rocket Raccoon, the prison escape scene, the ridiculousness of them planning this huge escape while Groot just slowly stretches his hand up and just yanks things down, having Drax and everything going over his head, like just the degree of literalness he presents. Guardians of the Galaxy did an excellent job of introducing half a dozen new characters, all of which were good. All of the new characters Guardians introduced were good. It was such a solid introduction to, here's a bunch of new people. They're going to be part of your universe. Welcome them and enjoy. I really liked Guardians of the Galaxy a lot. And then we have Avengers Infinity War, which by now, if you're paying attention, also means you know my number one pick. But Avengers Infinity War, my second highest rated movie in the MCU, is non-stop action. But it works because they have spent 10 years growing and developing these characters. And it still maintains that humor, that action, that gravitas left, right, and center in these world-ending stakes. The movie starts on a high with Thanos taking over Thor's ship, and then instantly, a second later, Loki's gone and you're never going to see him again, or at least so we thought. Or I thought. I actually thought they killed him. Maybe I was wrong. I was wrong. We know that now. But either way, it starts you on that high. And then next thing you know, you have Thor crashing back into Earth. Not Thor, you have the Hulk crashing down into Earth, trying to warn Doctor Strange, trying to warn Iron Man as they face off in the streets against Thanos' agents. And every single scene from the minute to minute is just action-packed adventure and humor. The two combined. It manages to combine high stakes, drama, energy, emotion, all these things throughout the course of the entire movie. When the Guardians and the Avengers combine, when they cross paths, when Spider-Man's being sent off into space, when he's like, oh, I'm Peter Parker, I'm Doctor Strange. Oh, we're using our made-up names. Okay, I'm Spider-Man. The degree of humor in these movies, the degree of emotion and energy, all the way to the very last moment in the film, when they fail, and Thanos snaps his fingers, and people start fading away. And we're left sitting there for a year, not wondering whether people died. Obviously, these people are coming back, but what will happen? How will they tie this up? How will they close up the stakes of half the universe splitting into oblivion? I still love Infinity War. It's still so good at what it does. It is still so emotionally impactful, action frenetic. That moment when WandaVision pops down into the battlefield and then everyone is floored by the degree of power she's bringing to the table, and everyone's like, why was she up there all along? It is so ridiculously good. And lastly, for my number one pick, we have Thor Ragnarok, which I think is particularly fitting because Thor The Dark World is my least favorite MCU movie and Thor Ragnarok is my favorite MCU movie. It does such a good job of bringing the humor to the table. It has a variety of some of my favorite characters, not all the characters. Where Infinity War potentially ranks higher is just the degree of the team that you have together. Thor Ragnarok removes that. You have Thor, you have Loki, you have a handful of characters in this universe. You don't have the full stakes of an MCU. You have Hulk in there, but it does so well. And it does so with constant references to jokes of the past. That moment when Thor is just like, when the Hulk is smashing Thor into the ground and Loki just jumps up. That's how it feels! It is such a funny movie. And of course it introduces Jeff Goldblum, who's amazing in his own right and is perfectly cast in the role of that movie. And then the humor. And again, the soundtrack as well. The soundtrack does an excellent job. The stakes does an excellent job. It sets itself up well for Infinity War, where the next movie we watch is Infinity War, and then just things go heartbreakingly off an edge. But Thor Ragnarok, to me, is one of the funniest MCU movies I've watched. It rivals Guardians of the Galaxy in the sheer humor it brings to the table, but it did so with characters I knew and loved and was more invested in than Guardians of the Galaxy. Thor Ragnarok is a movie that I've watched like 4 times, which I've watched some MCU movies more than that, but not anything anywhere near as recent. Starting off with him spinning, as we start seeing that fire demon lord and taking over Ragnarok, whatever it is, and just the control Thor has the whole movie. Tawiti, what's his name? The director. Something Tawiti, I'm sorry, forgetting the name of the director, but he did such a great job with that movie, and I'm looking forward very much so to Thor Love and Thunder for that exact reason. He did such a great job with that movie that anything he touches, I am excited for. It was such an enjoyable, and then we have, what's his name? What's this character's name? I can't remember him, but they did such a good job. It was humorous, it was funny, it personified why I watch Marvel movies. It's not because they're action movies. The action's great, the effects are great, but I watch Marvel movies because of the humor, because of the camaraderie that they bring to the table. That's why if you look at my 4 favorite movies, Thor Ragnarok, Avengers Infinity War, Guardians of the Galaxy, Marvel's The Avengers, they're all going to have that degree of teamwork, of people working together as a cohesive team, cracking jokes, taking down endgame stakes, left, right, and center. That's my ranking of the MCU. I did not think this movie would go so long at all. This video would go so long. I thought this would be a significantly shorter video, but I guess that's what happens when you try to recap 24 movies. Even at only 3 minutes a movie, that's still going to run close to an hour. In any case, a reminder, if this video gets 1,000 likes, which I'm expecting it won't, because even the last one only barely got 1,000, but if it does get 1,000 likes, Rena will do her own ranking of the MCU, and like I said already, her ranking is fairly different. She has some of my favorite movies way down below, and in general, I think she's just far more critical of it. In any case, until next time, I'm Alex Radcliffe from Board Game Co., and I hope you have a good one.